Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last part we finished our little surfing journeys across the western half of Hoenn and finally headed east past Mauville onto Route 118. And in doing so we ran into Steven, and now we have a Lati forced onto our team, Latias here in Alpha Sapphire, Latios over in Omega Ruby. And largely I'm just going to ignore they're there, but also in doing so we got Mega Evolution unlocked, which... yay, we can finally use that. We've only been finding Mega Stones since, what, Slateport, I think, on off? Like I said back then, I'm not going to be using Mega Evolution too much throughout the LP because, frankly, with the experience you get with how the experience share works in this generation on top of just fighting all the trainers along the way, you're going to be over-leveled anyway, and in a lot of fights, it'll take longer for Mega Evolution to go off than it will to just finish the fight, period. With that said, before we get into the first new Pokemon of the part, worth noting, I am going to be getting most of the Mega Stones you can in Alpha Sapphire across this playthrough. There's only really one I'm not going to be able to, which I'll get into why a little bit relatively shortly in the LP, and then again way later. Alright, first new Pokemon for the part, this is Masquerain. This evolves from Surskit at level 22. Bug flying type, so it's weak to flying, rock, fire, ice, and electric, but immune to ground. Notably, rock is a 4x weakness. By default, it has Intimidate for its ability, so lowers attack when it enters battle, but it can also have Unnerve, which prevents the target foes from actively being able to eat their berries if they have any as held items. Masquerain has, at this point in the series, some okay special stats, but nothing too easy to write home about. It did notably get a boost in Gen 7 to have a much higher special attack stat, making it much more useful. From memory at this point in the series, it can learn some okay flying and bug type moves to take advantage of stab on top of some okay moves on top of it otherwise. Just, for some reason in my head, bugs prior to Gen 5, I only usually like using one per generation at most. And I think that's just like a feel thing where I feel how fragile they are largely, and I'm usually like, okay, no, I can only use maybe this one because it has this specific thing I like about it, as I've covered more or less in so many words in prior LPs and earlier on in this very LP, effectively. So worth noting, we have some extremely tall grass here on Route 119. I believe in the original Gen 3 you couldn't ride your bike through this. I might be wrong about that. Future me, check me on that, please. But here in Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby, you can ride through it completely safely. No real thing to worry about there. There is notably a Pokemon that I believe can only really be found on this route in that grass. I'm just getting a little ahead of ourselves. It's a neat design. Not very good to use in my memory, but that's a whole different topic at that point. They do give you a healing point here, which felt a little redundant in the original Gen 3, but honestly, them adding that fight with Matt and the Team Aqua grunt with Steven actively gives you enough reason to need a healing point. Outside of the fact that Steven himself heals you there because they gave you way too many free heals in this remake, I feel, because it gets to the point where it feels like they're excessive. In this double battle already, though, we have our next new Pokemon. In specific, the Psychic here is going to be throwing out a Kadabra. This evolves from Abra at level 16. Pure Psychic type, so it's weak to Bug, Ghost, and Dark. Kadabra is a really good special attacker with some really good speed to back it up. It can't do much physically, and it can't take a hit too well on the HP stat, but it's a completely usable Psychic type. Hell, I used one in my Fire Red LP for that exact reason, albeit I did evolve it there, and the issue with evolving a Kadabra is that it does require training, so you either need someone on standby, or to use the online mode in some form or manner. Mind you, if you do evolve it, and I forget if we actively see the evolution across the campaign, I'll need to remind myself as we go, you get one of the best special attackers consistently in the series. I really like its evolution. I believe I may have brought up earlier in the LP that largely if a Pokemon evolves by trading, the state you can get it up to without needing to trade is still really good. And that is largely true as long as it's part of a 3 evolution state Pokemon line. Because if it only evolves the once, largely the first stage is fine, but you really do want to evolve it. I'm thinking of some especially in Gen 5 that are much better for that. But I'll save most of that for when we actively reach Gen 5 ultimately. So Route 119 actively has a lot of little layers to it, little side paths that'll lead to secret bases of the like. I want to say back when I played this more regularly, I think this is the route where my secret base was? If it wasn't here, it was at a very specific place on the southeastern portion of Hoenn, which we'll talk more about as we go. But notably right here, we have our first instance that we've seen of the little thin tracks that the acro bike can actively go along. And in this case, this largely leads to, I believe, some extra little sections of secret bases and all that. It takes a little bit of getting used to being able to jump with the acro bike, and by that I mean specifically trying to go lateral with it. There is a slight timing to how you press the buttons to do that, but it doesn't take that long to get used to. I'd say at most like a minute or two, maybe doing 3 or 4 in a row to really get the hang of it. There's not many times you need to use it, but you're probably going to need to use it if you're trying to get everything done. Also, there's the occasional moment in doing these LPs where I actively ponder whether or not I should cut a battle out. We're coming up on a largely optional trainer battle, but I want to get the item over there. But as you can see, there's a mock bike ramp over there, because we can come back down from above to get this. But I don't currently have the mock bike, so I'm like, do I cut it or do I not? Because of the speed up, it's quick enough where I figured I can just leave it in there, but it's one of those moments where I'm actively really split with myself on whether or not to cut it or not. Like, do I just wait until I get the mock bike again or all that? I guess it really depends. There's occasional moments like that in doing LPs where I'm just like, my usual structure has 2 different opinions on how to do this, and I'm split with choice paralysis on which one to do. For progression, it's optional, but eh. So, very weird thing about Gen 6 here in specific with how they handle the Gen 3 remake. Right here we have another new trainer type, this Ninja Boy. Here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, you have to talk to any of the ninja kids to actively battle them. In my memory, and I believe I'm right on this, future me obviously confirm me if I'm wrong for some reason. In the original versions of Hoenn present in Gen 3, if you got into their line of sight, they would drop their wall and walk down to you. I don't know why they changed that. Not that there's many of them to begin with. I think off the top of my head, of the walls at least, there's only like maybe 5 or 6. So maybe they figured the animation wasn't worth having around, but still weird. We're even forced to stand lookout while the admins are off having private time. We're standing lookout here. Hey, stay away from the Weather Institute. It's not safe. But I want to go in. It's the only thing I can do at this point because we're at a dead end otherwise. Welcome to the Weather Institute. There seems to be some kind of disturbance on the 2nd floor, but I'm a professional. I'm not easily rattled. Alright. While I was sleeping, everyone went upstairs. Right here we have another free heal point, so that's 3 within like a 10-minute walk, by the way, as well as a PC. And I actively hit a jump cut there, you may have heard, where I have actively brought Chris into my party and deposited the Latias that we actively got. On top of that, in that same jump cut, I also super trained Chris up. Now, normally I would actively probably more focus on entirely physical attack and speed with a Sharpedo, similarly to what I did with Kenny. But just to vary things up a little bit, I instead focused Chris entirely on both attack stats. So now not only can he use his physical attack stat that he already has a pretty good one of really well, he can also use special attacks decently well, which considering Surf is going to be a special type water move that he's going to have on for a lot of the LP, might as well make as much power of that as we can. Also got Ice Fang on him by default, which is a really good Ice type move to have around this early and to help against any Dragon types we encounter. On top of and potentially inflict the free status ailment, as rare as that is to actively have happen. So, as we've already seen several times at this point, it's time for some more Team Aqua grunts. With that said, you're used to dealing with them at this point. Same with Team Magma over in Omega Ruby. Also, I don't think I've actively stated it at this point. I've mentioned that there's a different Pokemon that replaces the Carvanhas and Sharpedos you'll probably get used to seeing with Team Aqua over in Omega Ruby. Largely, that's going to be Numels and their evolution Camerupt when we eventually fight one of those. Biggest thing is, if you're going to be fighting Carvanhas and Sharpedos, you're probably going to want fighting type moves or grass type moves. With Numels or Camerupts, get this, because they're fire and or ground types, you're probably going to want water type moves largely. With Team Magma, who'd have thought? I don't know why, I feel like compared to some of the other teams, I get sick of Team Aqua and Team Magma grunts faster than I do, say, Team Rocket or Team Galactic and the others, but I'm going to need to think more on that as I go through this LP. Could it be? Is this the world Archie hoped to create? Curse you, the precious results of my research! Give them back! Shut your mouth. Ugh. Steady on, are you alright? Fine, I'll give it back. I'll give it back, alright. The awakening of the super ancient Pokemon will bring about extreme weather. If this happened all over the world, what would become of Pokemon, not to mention people? The awakening of the who's it's what's it now? Yeah, just like doing a cursory thought, like, Team Rocket I don't find annoying, at least in Kanto. In Johto I do, if only because they got 2 games in a row. Aqua and Magma, for being 2 distinct teams, I get tired of pretty quickly in comparison, but I'm not sure exactly if that's just, like, burn from playing Gen 3 enough times over the years in some form or manner. Team Galactic I don't remember being that annoyed by outside of specifically one admin relatively early in the game, but it's been a while since I played Gen 4, so hell if I remember exactly at this point. Team Plasma didn't annoy me too much in either variant of Gen 5. Team Flare was pretty much nothing of note to me. Team Skull I actively like fighting, if only because they're dorks. Team Star and Team Yell basically don't exist in the same ways that the prior teams do off the top of my head, though. Oh my. I even run into you when I'm not on the clock. I wonder why that is. Maybe we're destined to be together. Wanna know something? I'm feeling so empty and downhearted right now, I can't get my head straight. Help me take my mind off of it? The way you and your Pokemon battle so straightforwardly and sincerely with such hope makes me so mad. Time for our next fight against Shelly. However, she's actively downgraded, being a little closer to how Matt was fought last time. She just has a single Sharpedo this time around. Rough Skin for its abilities, Swagger, Ice Fang, Scary Face, and Slash. Not running a Water-type move is an interesting choice there, but be careful of Swagger. I don't think I've talked about that move yet. Swagger boosts the physical attack stat of the opponent Pokemon by 2 stages, but also inflicts confusion. And if memory serves, the confusion status ailment does do more damage with the self-hits if their stat is boosted. Future me, please check me on that, though. I might be wrong about that. I know there's some abilities and guards that actively do change the amount of damage that does, but I forget if that actively influences it. Largely, if you have a single grass-type move, this fight goes by pretty quickly. Also, this specific fight makes for a very good instance of the level differences between Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and the original Gen 3, but I'll get into that after this set of cutscenes coming up here, because we have a little bit of talking to do here. That tired me out. I feel a bit more relaxed. Thanks. As a token of my gratitude, I'll tell you one thing. When Team Aqua's... No. When the illustrious Archie's ambitions have been realized, the world will truly return to its beginnings. To before the birth of anything at all. Think for yourself about what to do when you're up against that reality. I still haven't figured out for myself what's wrong and what's right. See ya. I'm sure I'll run into you again, though. Archie is probably on the way to Mount Pyre, so I... Thank you, young one. You helped save us from quite a pinch. You okay there, mate? Hey, that truly was a slap in the face. Those thieves. What could they hope to gain by investigating the extreme weather patterns of thousands of years ago? Oh, but I'm forgetting myself. First, I must thank you properly for your help. It might seem an odd way of rewarding you, but please, take this Pokemon as my thanks. You cannot carry any more Pokemon with you currently. Why don't you come to call again after you made space on your team? But as for the data those ruffians were seeking, they wanted to know about the extreme weather conditions that ruled thousands of years ago because of those 2 super ancient Pokemon. One of that pair was the legendary Pokemon we know as Mighty Kyogre. By absorbing the energy that abounds in the natural world, Kyogre transformed itself. Or so it is said. The transformed Kyogre caused so much disturbance to the weather patterns that the world was assaulted by torrential rains and the seas rose around the planet. We refer to this transformation as primal reversion. The result is the terror we call Primal Kyogre. Primal reversion is a possible form of evolution like and yet not like Mega Evolution. Or so it has been theorized. But it has never been achieved by any Pokemon other than the Super Ancient Legendary Pokemon, and so it has been largely forgotten as a method of evolution. If you'll excuse us then, we'll be heading downstairs now, but talk to us when you have a moment. We want to thank you as well. So the first thing I actively want to do is go get a space out of my party, so I can actively get the Pokemon this guy wants to give us. In specific, he gives us Castform. This is a bit of an interesting Pokemon in that its type depends on what weather state is active at that point in time. With no weather, it's normal. When there's a sunny weather state, it becomes a fire type. When it's raining, it becomes a water type. And if there's a hail state, it becomes an ice type. Notably, that means it gets the usual weaknesses as its type shifts. As a normal type, it's weak to fighting, immune to ghost. As a fire type, it's weak to ground, rock, and water. As a water type, it's weak to grass and electric. And as an ice type, it's weak to fighting, rock, steel, and fire. The issue with Castform is it's good for setting up those weather conditions, but it doesn't have any super standout stats, and I remember its moveset not being the best for attacking or defending in any case. In doubles, it might work well as a setup Pokemon to help set up other strategies with stronger Pokemon, but it's not one I like to use in any kind of casual setup. We can actively take a look at the different forms here just in the Pokedex though, thankfully. It's a cute idea, but like several other Pokemon we'll see throughout the series, it largely more exists to be a showcase of a new mechanic they introduced in a generation since weather was added into Gen 3. It's cute, but that's really about it. So the topic I wanted to talk about there at the end of Shelly's fight. So level-wise, Shelly's Sharpedo is level 32, and we have Pokemon up into our early 40s in level. To showcase the differences in experience yields on top of the experience share changes. In the original Gen 3, you're fighting late level 20s at this point, and you're at most in your mid 30s. You get so many more levels here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire that they try to combat by raising the levels in general across the board. But honestly, not many fights will really give you trouble because of that still. Notably though, by talking to the scientist and the receptionist here, we do get some items. The scientist gives you a rocky helmet, which effectively acts as rough skin as a held item. Pokemon that attack Pokemon holding that lose some percentage of their HP that I think might even stack with rough skin. Future me, check me on that. Meanwhile, if you check in with the receptionist at the Weather Institute across a couple of days, you'll get different rock held items. What those do, like the Icy Rock we just got, is extend the amount of turns, I believe, that a weather condition is active in the field. Icy Rock works on hail. The Damp Rock, if you get that, works with rain. I believe there's one for the Sandstorm weather status, as well as the Harsh Sunlight weather state as well. With that said, now that I actively have Chris in my party, I can come back down here towards the southern part of Route 119 and access the only part of the route I can still access that we haven't at this point yet, besides just going into progress. Notably, parts of this route, as well as part of the route west of Full Arbor, we can surf in now, but there's actively items we can't grab until we get a different HM later on anyway, so I'm saving that until then. Notably though, this fisherman does have a new Pokemon for us, and if you're playing the original Generation 3 and 4 and 5, it's one of the rarest Pokemon to find in the series. It's the Generation 3 pure water type known as Feebas. Feebas being a pure water type, weak to grass and electric. It's got some high speed, but the rest of its stats outside of maybe its special defense are pretty trash. But that's because this Pokemon is meant to more tie into an evolutionary method they added in Gen 3, tying into the contest stats. The thing is, though, about finding a Feebas, you can only find it on this route in the original Ruby Sapphire Emerald. And it's randomly generated where you can find it because you can only fish it up on 6 randomly chosen tiles that tie into the trend at Dewford Hall. Meanwhile, in Gen 4, in one specific dungeon's one specific floor, you can find them in 4 specific fishing spots that change daily. With that said, with the turn of 3D in the franchise, finding a Feebas got much easier. They're just a percentage-based fishing in any area you can actually catch them. A nightmare once upon a time, nowadays much easier to come by, thankfully. And honestly, if you actively catch a Feebas and go through the method to evolve it, you get a pretty solid water type with some high enough HP and special stats. I like it as a water type a lot. I've used it a couple times. Again, I just have one specific water type I really like to use more than any of the others. I also distinctly remember, I believe, when I first played Platinum and got much further in it than the rest of the Pokemon games up to that point I played. I believe Feebas's evolution was the last Pokemon I needed to see to complete the Sinnoh regional dex. I think. From memory, Sinnoh has one of the best Pokedexes when it comes to finding the Pokemon both in the wild and through trainers, but it's been a little bit at this point. Although not for nothing, if you're trying to complete the Pokedex in general, and transferring them via bank or anything else onto modern contexts, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are one of your best friends. I won't talk about the exact numbers right now, but you can get a lot of Pokemon in this specific entry across the two versions. Also worth noting, personally for my taste when it comes to the secret base, some of the more out-of-the-way locations, while they might be cooler on the interior, just aren't worth the trek to go back into to customize further. Largely when I made secret bases in this, I remember trusting ones that were a closer distance to a fast travel point in some form or manner. They may have been more awkwardly shaped, but I didn't care. With that leaf stone out of the way, we've now grabbed all the items we can on this route for now, so let's finally head north towards our next destination. Kyle! Gosh, where have you been hiding? I've been looking all over for you. Oh, where did you get that thing on your wrist? That's a pretty fancy looking bracelet. Wow, so that's a Mega Bracelet? And you can use it for Mega Evolution. I guess now you can keep getting even closer to your Pokemon, huh? Some guys have all the luck. But I'm not about to lose to you in some accessory. Let's see who's best in battle. Are your Pokemon all ready? Of course they are. Let's go. So like with prior fights, May's team setup here depends on what you chose as your starter. To go over the Pokemon she's had prior, if you face a version of her that has a Wailmer, it's going to have Water Veil, Water Pulse, Mist, Brine, and Rest. If you face one of her Shroomishes, it has Effect Spore, Poison Powder, Warrior Seed, Giga Drain, and Growth. And if you face her Slugma, it has Clear Smog, Ancient Power, Flame Burst, and Rock Slide with Magma Armor for its ability. The big difference comes down to what the starter is you chose and which one she'll have because of that. Though, just to go over the level differencing again between how much higher they boost levels here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire versus the original Gen 3, the equivalent fight for me here, because I chose a Torchic over in Emerald, her Shroomish is level 29, the Numel she has instead of a Slugma is level 29, and her March Jump that we'll see is level 31. Meanwhile, here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, the non-starters are level 31 and the starters level 33. They boosted the level slightly, and honestly, with the amount of experience you get, they may not have boosted it enough. It's weird, because in my memory, Gen 3 itself can be a bit of a rough playthrough at times because of balancing in general at that point in the series and how the types worked. But honestly, because of either the experience share being the way it used to be, or just the amount of experience you got from things to begin with, it could be a genuinely tough playthrough in my memory. But then again, I think back, like I believe I mentioned already in the LP, I did a playthrough of Emerald on stream around the time I did the LP for Soul Silver. And I didn't have much trouble with that until I got to the Elite Four in specific. Either way, as for May's starters, for me here she has the March Jump as usual, Torrent for its ability. Bide, Mud Bomb, Rock Slide, and Protect. Mud Bomb can be the biggest threat there, especially if you bring out your Fire type. If you chose a Mudkip, she'll have a Grovyle at this point, Pursuit, Leaf Blade, Agility, and Slime with Overgrow for its ability. And if you chose a Trico, she'll have a Combuskin, Blaze for its ability, Double Kick, Flame Charge, Quick Attack, and Bulk Up. Honestly, the Combuskin's probably the most dangerous of those. Although the fact that the Grovyle already has Leaf Blade is pretty powerful in some instances. I'm trying to think. In a modern context, I want to say May might be the easiest Pokemon rival to fight. Because Blue can be rough, Silver can be a little rough here and again. Barry in Gen 4 can be a bit troublesome. Sharon can be troublesome here and again in Gen 5. Bianca, not so much. Gen 6 is where I think they really just started making the rivals much easier to fight in general. Especially the trinity of friends who I only remember the name Tierno from in Gen 6. Although I say that, Hop and How can both bring some pain in certain fights towards the late game or post game. Honestly, Gen 9 and its DLC, with the exception of its base champion fight during the one Path to Power, it really just blows the prior game's fight design in the main campaign out of the water in a lot of regards. But again, I'll save most of that kind of thought process-y for when I eventually reach Scarlet and Violet in probably like a decade and a half at the current going rate. You're as strong as I expected, Kyle. Well, you did battle me like I asked, so I'll give you a reward. And we get HMO2 Fly. If you use Fly, your Pokemon will carry you back to anywhere you've been before. But you must have the gym badge from Fortree City to fly outside of battle. That's the most important bit, so don't forget. Maybe you should fly home and visit Little Root sometimes. I bet your mom worries about you, Kyle. Well, till we meet again, and next time, I won't lose. You know, thinking about it, I'm surprised Pokemon's never really implemented like a homesickness mechanic like what Earthbound had, where say you get a starter Pokemon from your mother, for instance, and then it just gets a little homesick and maybe kind of inverts like the Poke-Ami friendliness stats where maybe starts missing a little more often and all that. Maybe it's like a difficulty mode option if they ever decide to add another difficulty mode to the series again, considering the only time they really did that was Gen 5, and they did that in a very confusing way. So Fly is to the flying type what Dig is to the ground type. A decently powerful move that takes 2 moves to go off, but you're largely invulnerable during the move where it's charging up. But that said, like with Dig, there is a list of moves that can actively damage you while you're in the sky. Probably popping on screen right about now. But it's small enough where it's just a consistently powerful enough flying type move to have around. The only issue is with it, if you're doing singles, it's really powerful. In doubles, it does leave your partner Pokemon pretty much out in the open, then it's going to be kind of a forced target, barring Pokemon trying to actively target the flying type Pokemon if they're slow or fast enough. Something to keep in mind that has some strategic influence, but for casual setting, just going through the campaign, it's just one of the best flying type moves consistently for me. They're largely pretty kind with the HM moves, where since you can't delete them until you get to a very specific NPC, where if you put one onto a Pokemon, it's going to make for a decent enough move to use in battle, with the only exception being Flash when it's an HM, Rock Smash sometimes, and Cut not being that great as a usable move. With that said, welcome to Fortree City, one of my favorite cities in the franchise. What's really unique about this place is that most of the houses are just outright tree houses up on elevated trees. And I just have always found the aesthetic of that really neat, I won't lie. Don't know why, it may have just been the cartoons I watched growing up and all that jazz, but I always really wanted a tree house when I was a little kid. Issue was, our backyard, where most tree houses usually would be, was a pretty steep hill where that had no trees on it. There were trees at the bottom of the hill, but I think at that point that was someone else's property, so it just wasn't an option. It's interesting because thinking about it, like, most of my hobbies kind of go counter to tree houses as an idea. Like, I guess I could play my Game Boy Advanced in it at the time, or my DS, but like most consoles, I would have to like jerry-rig a whole bunch of wires getting into the tree to play like a TV in that. That would just be a nightmare to work with. Would not have been worth it at all, really. Now, we're not going to tackle the gym and do any major plot progress in this town until next time. But with some minor things we can note along the way. For one thing, there's a Pokemon trade you can do in this house. I believe it's a Spin Up for a Skitty, which honestly isn't that worth it because both are super easy to catch. I want to say that trade was more worth it in the original Gen 3, but I don't remember what it was offhand. This house has a TM for us that's a little bit interesting, but we had to win 3 coin flips in a row to get it. Though I think the coin flips have determined outcomes. The TM we get here is Hidden Power. Hidden Power is a low power move that the type of which varies depending on the Pokemon, based on the IVs of the Pokemon in question. So for any Pokemon you try to teach it to, while it might display as a normal type, the type it actively works as in battle will be completely different. And you can determine what type of Hidden Power type a Pokemon has by talking to this old lady's sister just to the right. It's an interesting move, but it takes so much preparation trying to figure out what IVs you'd want on a Pokemon to use it as a move with Stab that it's just a move I tend to completely ignore the existence of. Though I remember it being decent in Legends Arceus because I think it was always super effective against the Pokemon you were fighting in some way or manner. Mind you, in general, they had to change a lot of very minor things about the way these games worked for Legends Arceus because it's such a radically different setup. And because at the time this gets uploaded, I know Legends ZA isn't going to be out yet. I'm wondering how they update things for that in that regard. In fact, just to kind of date this episode, the first episode goes up tomorrow. So, try my best to keep ahead, but if I fall behind on uploads again because this takes long enough to be made, don't be surprised. Worth noting, talking to this specific NPC sends his Wingull off to the next major town, and that starts off a minor side quest to get an item. But we'll fulfill that later on. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 16, we're going to explore Fortree a little bit more before finally tackling the gym here. See you guys then.